amount of new buildings that River Oaks say will be proposed as part of their intended DCO application, even allowing for the very significant, extraordinary actually, error in the material published in relation to the application to date. So what we've got now is at 66,000 square metres of cargo buildings and around 130,000 square metres, not 1.4 million square metres, of other buildings on the northern grasslands, but insofar as the point is of relevance, it still holds good. Turning now to the supply of employment floor space, and I use floor space advisedly, which I'll come to. It's important first to be clear, sir, that because the reuse of the appeal buildings for economically beneficial development is fully consistent with national planning policy objectives to, and I quote from the MPPF, deliver business and industrial units, and the requirement in policy to place significant weight on the need to support economic growth, and because, sir, allowing the appeals would not prejudice decisions about the future use of the site in the longer term, it's not necessary, sir, for you to find that there is a shortage of units of the kind and size offered by the appeal buildings. The appeals we submit should be allowed in any event, because there's no harm to the objectives underlying the development plan policy. At the time the applications were made, a specific occupier had been found for Building 2, and there was interest also in some of the other floor space. Obviously, you've seen that Building 4 is now occupied, but firms can't wait indefinitely for their requirements to be met, and those expressions of interest, or those interests, have either been met or gone away. There have since then been further very significant delays. No criticism, sir, of anybody, least of all you, but very significant delays in the hearing and determination of the appeals, which meant that the appellants decided not to undertake the exercise again of seeking out further potential occupiers. Nevertheless, it is significant, we submit, that the District Council's Head of Economic Development and Regeneration has supported the appeal proposals, whilst his consultation response stated there was generally still limited demand for larger units. Why was that? It was because these require significant capital investment and are usually built out by developers, I think that should probably say, my apologies, only when agreement is in place for the occupier to lease or purchase the completed scheme. The point about the appeal buildings, sir, is that they exist and they are immediately available in the condition in which they are. I'll touch on that briefly in a moment. The Head of Economic Development also said he was pleased to see more inquiries for units of this size, and the district's employment sites contain very few existing units of this size. There is, we submit, therefore, likely to be demand, some demand, for the appeal buildings if the appeals are allowed and they're placed on the market. On the supply side, it's accepted that there's plenty of land for industrial business development in the district, but this is not generally being taken up for large buildings for the reason the Head of Economic Development gave, in short, cost. It is in any case, we respectfully submit, not relevant to look at the supply of land in this case, because the appeals concern large buildings that are immediately available for occupation. And that, sir, if you think it's necessary to look at this, is what we submit you should be looking at. What's the supply of large buildings? And in that respect, the Head of Economic Development's remark that there are very few existing units of this size has been entirely borne out by the evidence, and I've referred to the agreed schedule, which you now have as inquiry document 16. The position is that no building of comparable size to the appeal buildings has been identified as being currently available in Thanet District. There's one large shed available in Canterbury, New Dover Road, which can't realistically be described as local to the site, we suggest. There are some buildings at Barwick Road, Dover, even further away, on a site that's being marketed nearly about 20 miles for housing development, and in respect of which there is no evidence. It should say no. I'm sorry, I've I've read that badly. I thought I was about to make a different point. I'll start again. My apologies. There are some buildings at Barwick Road, Dover, on a site that's being marketed for housing development, and in respect to which there's evidence on the face of the particulars that the buildings are damaged and the site overgrown. It does not appear that the buildings themselves are available for letting. Anyway, that's in Dover. Construction hasn't started on Hamel Business Park, Woodensborough, the access to which, being in a rural location, is in any event not comparable to the appeal site. There are no industrial units available at Discovery Park, and there are no available units at Manston Business Park of a comparable size to the appeal buildings. Now, so just pausing there, and I'm sure that everyone wants me to finish, including myself, but I just need to deal with inquiry document 17, because what I wrote then was before the agreed schedule. It was before inquiry document 17. That's paragraph 5, but it's correct. It remains correct. I can't explain what the reason is why the owner says he's got nothing available and the agents are showing units that are available. I honestly don't think the appeals are going to turn on you resolving that particular matter. If one looks at the material rather than the emails from the agents and so on, then I'm just very quickly, if I may, going to identify. Well, I haven't had a chance to look at it. I've been looking. I mean, I can't remember when I was handed it. Why is that, sir? I don't understand. Yeah. It's being suggested you may think we're trying to disagree with the schedule, which we're not. I'm not going to do that. Right. And if you think that, I apologise, I've misled you. Yes, that's fine, that's agreed. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm not... No, my apologies, I didn't make it clear. The schedule is fine, that's agreed, and I'm not resigning from that in the least. I'm referring to inquiry document 17, which is a bundle of material that was submitted, and I have absolutely no complaint about this. It's a sort of fattish, that's it, which was submitted by, my apologies. It seems like other people did too, so it is entirely my fault, but I'm not raising any points on the schedule. It's an agreed document, and you can rely on that entirely. All I'm going to point out, so in relation to inquiry document 17, which is various emails saying there are units available, and you can read it for yourself. I'm not going to take up time with that. I was just going to refer you, so, to the property particulars to point out that these, even if these properties are available, and there seems to be some confusion about that, but I'm not going to invite you to find that they're not available. Maybe they are, but they are much smaller than the appeal buildings, other than possibly building 4. But so if I can very quickly direct you to the relevant bits, this is just a matter of fact. The first one is Clark and Crittenden. So do you have that? It's after the excuse me. It's after the emails in River Oaks bundle, and that's Manston. Do you see in Victor where new modern industrial units to let with high ceilings and mezzanine floors? If you look under description, the second paragraph, you'll see each unit has a ground floor gross area of about 1453 square feet, and then there's a mezzanine of about 1300. So that's what those are. You've got exactly the same figures on the next page under description. All I'm doing is pointing out where you'll find the sizes of the units. On the next page there's nothing that's relevant. That's all part of the previous document. Again, the next page, which is I think prime location, has exactly the same figures again under description, 1453 square feet plus a mezzanine of about 1300. It's a picture of the same building, so that's not surprising from a different agent, I think, or a different source rather. Then, so do you have light industrial for sale, the Oaks Manston Business Park in Victor Way?
Yes, indeed.
That's 1,000 square feet. These are for sale rather than letting. Then on the next page you've got square footage of certain units. Unit 11 is the biggest one, but that's only 3,000 odd square feet, about 300 square metres.
Is this to support your point in
It is.
Roman 5?
That there are nothing available of a comparable size.
Okay.
Have you had enough?
Well,
I mean, if I go on, then you'll find the same sorts of similar information. 190 square metres.
I think I've got
You've got the point. Well, if you've got the point, I shall.
Well, I mean, you carry on.
No.
I don't wish to interrupt you.
You've got You're not interrupting me. You've got the point. That is exactly the point. If you yourself continue looking through that, you'll find that you'll be able to identify where the floor space figures are given, and they are much smaller units in the appeal buildings. That's the point I'm making. I'm sorry to make heavy weather of it. It was just the document came in this afternoon, and I thought I'd better refer to it. I'll move on to paragraph 58 of my submissions in the middle of page 16. The appeal buildings are in varying states of condition, but they're all watertight and could be made available for immediate occupation. I mean, building 3, I absolutely accept, is pretty filthy and would need a major clean out, but nevertheless, major works are not needed to make them available for occupation. Some potential occupiers may be able to move in without undertaking significant works of adaptation or improvement. Other types of occupier may need some works of that kind to be done. It would be obviously for the firm in question to decide whether, in the light of all the circumstances, including their own needs and the promised DCO application, as well as the appellant's own planning application, to decide whether or not to take on a lease of the building in question. In conclusion, so the appeal buildings fill a gap in the supply of employment floor space of this type and size, and would, if the appeals were allowed, be likely to bring benefits in terms of job creation and supporting economic activity. These benefits would be relatively modest, but would, we submit, be real nonetheless. Finally, before some very brief conclusions, I turn to make some submissions about the Stansted appeal decision, which has been relied on by River Oak perfectly appropriately, but I need to deal with this. All appeals obviously will turn on their own facts, but it is still instructive to consider the reasons for the dismissal of the appeal made in respect to the office building at Stansted, because this in fact tends to support, when one properly understands it, rather than militate against allowing the present appeals. First, the factual context is very different, since Stansted is an operational airport, which Manston isn't. Second, the relevant development plan policy in that case, which you'll see when you look at the decision, again, S4 of the local plan there, was not argued to be out of date, therefore the inspector gave it full weight. The policy was also expressed, I just ask you to note, in more restrictive terms than EC4. It said certain activities or uses will not be permitted within the airport boundary, whereas EC4 reserves the land for airside development. Third, the inspector, in my respectful submission, correctly did not dismiss the appeal merely on the basis that the proposal was in direct conflict with policy S4, which it was, but went on to consider whether harm would result from that conflict. It's exactly what we're inviting you to do here. He found that there would be, in that the proposal would set a precedent for allowing other underused floor space at the airport to be used for non-airport related uses, that by accretion significant amounts of floor space might be used in that way, and thus that over time the airport might tend to exhibit the characteristics of a business park, which might leave the council increasingly less able to hold on to the concept of a self-contained airport in the countryside. These considerations simply don't arise in the present case. Fourth, the inspector's overall conclusion was this: the proposal would prejudice the supply of airport-related office floor space at the airport and undermine the wider objective of restraining the growth of the airport beyond its present boundaries. Again, those, we submit, are issues that do not arise in the present case. Fifth, there was evidence that occupation of the appeal premises would simply transfer the underuse to premises elsewhere. There's no such evidence in this case, nor was there a shortage of suitable office floor space there, but we submit there is, on the evidence, a shortage of large industrial storage premises here in Thanet. The circumstances at Stansted were therefore very different, and whilst the inspector's reasons for dismissing the appeal in that case are clear, that should say, not is clear, it is not in any material respect applicable. They are not. The reasons are not in any material respect applicable to the present case. Indeed, it illustrates rather that, in the absence of any harm arising from the breach of development plan policy, economically beneficial development should be allowed. Conclusions. Neither Thanet nor Kent County Council raises any objection to the appeals. This is a significant matter, we submit, to which substantial weight should be given. Although the appeal proposals are not in accord with local plan policy EC4, this is out of date and therefore attracts reduced weight. When it is interpreted and applied in the light of current circumstances, the real question is, would the appeal proposals materially prejudice or undermine the purpose underlying the policy, which is to keep the option open of resumption of airport use? The answer to that question is no. The claimed difficulties that the occupation of the appeal buildings would bring are ephemeral at best. Allowing the appeals would also accord with planning policy objectives of encouraging economic activity without causing any significant and demonstrable harm. The appeals should therefore be allowed. And those are my submissions. I'm sorry, despite the similarity in number of pages, that took a bit longer than the learned friend submissions, but those are my submissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. All I was just going to say, you make reference to me in the first paragraph of your submissions. I want to make it clear to everybody, and just to avoid any confusion, the distinction I was seeking to draw there was that my concern is obviously with the 4 appeals before me, and that the development consent order process is a separate process. That's the point I was.
Absolutely. I hope I haven't misrepresented you, but if I have, I apologise. I mean, it's a fairly neutral thing to say.
Yes, indeed. Obviously, the re-establishment of the airport is a matter for the PTO process, and that's perfectly correct. I just wonder whether it should be inserted in there that, as part of the PTO process, because that's what I've sought to do at this inquiry, to distinguish the process, the PTO process, from the planning appeals process. The two are separate processes. I don't wish to, just in case anyone is under.
No, that's quite right. You should say that. Thank you very much.
Well, that's normally the end of the process. Right, well, thank you all very much to Murphy, King, and all the witnesses, and indeed to all the contributors as well. Your contributions have been very helpful to me. So it now remains for me to digest all the information and come to a decision on the appeals. Thank you very much. Thank you. So that's all today, and indeed for this inquiry. So thank you all for your contributions, and I will now close the inquiry.